Cortez Masto.
I'm happy to follow through in your train of thought there, Senator Kennedy, because that was my question.
Bipartisanship.
Mr. Pettit, talk to me about these tariffs. You know, we have currently imposed tariffs on Canada. What's the short-term impact?
Thank you, Senator. The impact of tariffs in the short run may increase the prices of the imported goods, but the objective of these tariffs in the long run is to help incentivize more manufacturing here in the United States.
And if they impose more costs here for our companies, and companies pass that cost on to the consumers, which I have seen publicly they intend to do, is that higher cost for the American consumer? Higher prices?
In the short term, they could lead to higher prices on imported goods.
So you would agree with Canada's billboards that are in Nevada and across the country now that say tariffs are a tax on your grocery bill in the short term?
I'm not sure of the volume of imports of various produce and goods, but I would say that the intent of these tariffs is to help reshore. And
I know the intent. Let's talk about the short-term impacts. Would you agree, along with Canada, who has a billboard now in Nevada, tariffs are a tax on hardworking Americans? You just basically said that's the ultimate result. Would you agree?
I believe that the effect of tariffs is very different than a tax on Americans, but it could lead to higher prices on certain imported goods here in the United States.
To Americans?
Yes, ma'am.
If the companies pass the cost on to the Americans?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you this. If you're confirmed as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, will you respect the independence of the bank regulators?
Thank you for the question. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the regulators who do operate independently, yes.
And you will respect their independence?
I will.
Okay, so explain to me, if you can, because Secretary Besson has announced, and I think it was on March 6th in a speech, he stated something to the effect of our financial regulators singing in unison from the same song sheet is what he is looking for. We need our financial regulators singing in unison from the same song sheet. To be clear, this does not mean consolidation of agencies, but coordination via Treasury, such that our regulators work in parallel with each other and the industry. What does that mean?
Thank you, Senator. I believe, and not to speak on behalf of Secretary Besson, the intention of that statement was that we need to avoid the outcome of having regulators telling institutions different things, and so that institutions that are supervised by multiple federal regulators aren't torn between conflicting guidance.
So regulators should work in conjunction and parallel with the Treasury Department?
No, I think the objective here is to ensure that there is an uncertainty in terms of which rules to follow across different agencies.
Okay. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. Mr. Molinaro, thanks for meeting with me. I really appreciate the conversation that we had in my office. One of the things we talked about was transparency. And you called out your own Metropolitan Transit Agency on a lack of transparency and accountability. Can you promise that as an administrator, you will provide the public and Congress transparency in job firings and federal funding freezes that are currently being ordered by the Trump administration and those employed with DOGE?
Senator, I was nearly convinced none of you noticed I was here. Obviously, Senator, I don't know the current impacts. My expectation and my commitment is to uphold the highest standard of accountability and transparency, and to work with your offices certainly to explain both impacts of previous and future decisions within the FDA.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me ask you this. Congress previously worked deliberately in a bipartisan way to pass the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And the bill authorized up to $108 billion for fiscal years 2022 and 2026 to support public transit. Will you commit to dispersing all of the already approved funding and the remaining funding consistent with how it was authorized by Congress?
Senator, and again, I do appreciate the time we spent together. I don't know the status of awarded and contracted grants. I did read, I think yesterday morning, that there is now some advancement and release of those dollars. As you know, and I said to you, and I'll privately will say publicly, the President and the Secretary have asked me to advocate on behalf of transit systems across this country and the riding public. And so my expectation is to advocate for the disbursement of contracted and obligated awards.
Thank you. And then finally, let me just ask you this. We talked a little bit about this, rural communities and the challenges that we see for transportation in rural communities. I know your House district covered vast counties in upstate New York, where my husband and his family are from, and you're familiar with the lack of transit access. Can you talk a little bit about not only the challenges you saw, but how you addressed it and what you intend to do?
In 10 seconds, I will tell you I value working with supporting rural and regional transit systems. Think of hubs and spokes, urban and village and city centers being the hub, those regional rural districts, rural transit systems being the spokes. It's important we connect them to move Americans and to grow the American economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.